to myself again.
Good morning and welcome to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith. A little bit of a different background today. I'm in the office, out of the kitchen, so there shouldn't be any disturbing noises. You'll probably hear some sirens going past the office. But good to welcome Liam Kennedy on, as always, from NewcastleWorld.com to talk Newcastle United for the next hour or so. And we have a manager, Liam.
We do. Really positive step, real wave of positivity. I think there was a sense maybe at a point last week where people might have been slightly underwhelmed by somebody like Eddie Howe, but I think that fear has been totally dispelled. I think everybody's just delighted to have got the manager through the door. I think there's a lot of positivity by speaking to people who've had experience of him, who know him. His work ethic, highlighted by the 7 o'clock start this morning, is something that is so desperately needed at Newcastle United after Steve Bruce. There was I would suspect there's going to be quite a considerable culture change at Newcastle United under Eddie Howe now, which is something that I'm really looking forward to. There was probably a fair assessment from most people out there that Newcastle United didn't work hard enough under Steve Bruce, that it was a bit too laid back with regards days off, intensity at training, and focus on detail and tactics. And I think by the sounds of it, that's something that's going to be totally addressed under Eddie Howe. And I think that can only be a good thing, because Newcastle United need that. They need some solidity and structure, attention to detail, and drive. They desperately need some drive in this squad. The fitness levels need upped. It isn't ideal trying to improve fitness levels of a squad during a season, particularly in a run-up to a potentially very, very busy period. Newcastle United don't have the deepest of squads in Premier League terms. Of course, they only have 21 outfield players in their 25-man squad, which is another problem in itself. But I think it's something that needs done. I think there are very basic things you can do at Newcastle United that Eddie Howe will have a grasp of, that can automatically improve this team. I think there has been a slight improvement in the last few weeks with regards players going longer in games. There has been a little bit of an improvement in terms of getting the place organised and making them slightly more difficult to score against and to beat. That can only be a good thing. But the key to unlocking the door at Newcastle United for me, and it's so hard. It's so hard when you have a limited squad that you shut certain doors. You try to open certain doors, and other ones shut behind you. And I think what Graham Jones tried to do, and I haven't been his biggest fan, I'll be honest, over the 3 games, but what he tried to do was try to shut the door a little bit more defensively. So by opening that up, and that sounds really weird me saying that, but by opening that up, it meant other areas of the team suffered. Alan St-Maximin being the key thing. I've seen some really, I'll be honest, I was at Brighton at the weekend. Sorry to go slightly off topic here, Steve, but you know what I'm like at the start of a show.
Yeah.
I've seen some, I would say, unfair criticism of Alan St-Maximin. Alan St-Maximin hasn't had his best 3 games. Let's be absolutely honest. He's had little to no impact in the final third. And for me, he's been picking the ball up, I would say, at least 20 to 30 yards further back from where you'd want a player of his ability and ability to damage opposition teams. You would want him picking the ball up. But I've seen a lot of stuff. We're quite low down, right behind the dugout at Brighton. Seen a lot of down that left-hand side, particularly in the second half, a lot of the defensive work done by Alan St-Maximin. A lot of the chasing back, a lot of the tucking in. And it's a side of his game that he's never shown at Newcastle United. And it's positive, but what it's meant is we haven't seen the dangerous Alan St-Maximin at the other end. And that's why I would say some of the criticism of St-Maximin, particularly against Brighton, was really unfair. Because essentially he actually did the job he was meant to do pretty well. I think he was asked to do a lot of the covering, a lot of the tucking in, making them a more solid unit, because the way the setup was a 5-4-1 at Brighton. St-Maximin was very much on the left. He wasn't in a forward position, which he had been before. And I think there's little things like that that Eddie Howe is going to have to try and unlock, is to get the best of both worlds out of somebody like an Alan St. Maximin, to be able to create more chances for a Callum Wilson, because this, his back to goal with a defender against him, he can do a bit of it, but it's not his best game. And I thought he was poor at that at the weekend, but it's not his game. He wants chances and he'll put them away. He's proven that. But it's just about just getting the balance right. I think you probably look at it and say that an easy change over the 2 weeks, even though he's going to be away for most of it, will potentially bring the Martin Dubravka back into the side. You've got to look at a Fede Fernandez. You've got to look at a Fabian Schär, and say, can we get a tune out of those players? Schär's a funny one because he's barely kicked the ball for quite some time now. Even last season, he wasn't in, so you would suspect throwing him in. Is he going to be match fit?
I bet he wish he could turn back time, Liam.
Yeah. I think the triggering of the contract's probably the worst thing. That's taken me about. That shows how half asleep I am this morning. That's taken me about 10 seconds to actually get that, Steve. I'm half asleep, mate. So I do. He probably does wish he could turn back time. I think there's a number of things that we can be positive about. I was at Brighton. I didn't think it was the absolute disaster that many people painted it as. The first half was awful. Let's not beat around the bush. It really was awful. But I've seen enough in the second half. I wasn't that impressed by Brighton. A lot of talk of Brighton, how impressive they've been this season in the run-up of the game. I thought they were there for the taking throughout. I thought even the first 5-10 minutes, there was a couple of opportunities when Newcastle got 3-on-3. Were little breaks, didn't really capitalise and fell back on themselves after that. But I never really thought they were a great side. I didn't think they were brilliantly set up. And they were actually worse against Newcastle than they've probably been for the last few years. And it's one of those that, but for a tackle at the end of the game, then Newcastle United come away from that game with 3 points, and it's all real positivity. But that's the way the season's gone, because you look at the season itself and say they probably should have won at Watford. I think they should have won at Brighton, even though the chances, you would argue, went in the opposite direction more. And I would obviously say you should beat Southampton. If you got 6 points better off, you're in the mix and you're looking up rather than down. But look, I don't think the stats tell you one thing. There's not many teams, or teams don't get out of the position that Newcastle United find themselves in. They do get relegated from the Premier League with starts like this. But I think the fact that the gap is actually only 5 points after 11 games and they haven't won in 11 games and the gap's only 5 points, I think there's a lot of positives to take from that myself. You would expect the gap to be a little bit more than 5 points. And I think you couldn't ask for a better game to start off. Brentford, they had that little bump at the start of the season. It wasn't of Sheffield United proportions. It didn't last for 6 months. It lasted for a month, six weeks maybe. And they've struggled recently in the Premier League. They've struggled. They're a decent side, set up well, good setup. But, I think they're relying on 2 or 3 players to really, really play well. Your Ivan Tonys and others to make sure that they stay up there. And I think Newcastle United have got a great opportunity in the next game. And let's not mess around here as well. They need to win. They need to go and start winning games. You would argue over the next 4 weeks, you'll probably want to get another 3 wins under your belt. And that takes them into December with a real opportunity, rather than looking at December as a nightmare, which I think if you don't start picking up results soon, it will quickly become a winter nightmare.
Yeah. Okay. We did mention that the new boss and crew were at the training ground early, thanks to News 24, Newcastle News 24 on Twitter for that one. Good to see. We've also been sent a video in by Adam Pearson. Most of you will know Adam. He's been on the show before. He has his own YouTube channel, and he was up at the training ground bright and early and sent us this.
Morning Steve, morning Liam. As you can see, I'm just outside Newcastle United training ground now. Normally the players would come at about 9 o'clock in the morning, they would train up towards 12 o'clock, but as you saw earlier on today, Eddie Howe came at about 7 o'clock in the morning. I missed it, I came here about 7:45, I came here dead early. Good Graham Jones followed in the 10:15, and since then the players are expected to come in between 1 to 2 o'clock in the afternoon, so that is 7 hours after the managers came in today. I mean, a lot of stuff going on there, I imagine, but I mean, yeah, really odd time to come in at 7 o'clock in the moment. The players don't train for another 7 hours, but yeah, I guess he's trying to make a good first impression, which he certainly has with the fans. In terms of me though, about half 10 I'm going to go have a break at McDonald's, get something. I'm going to come back here, but I will be here all day giving you updates. And in terms of Newcastle United though, I mean, yeah, I'm quite interested to see where the club is now. This new manager, he's got to get started early because again, we are 5 points away from fourth bottom now. But yeah, back to the training ground as always though.
Thanks to Adam for that, and give him a follow. He's given up uni to go full-time as a Newcastle United correspondent, and God loves a tryer. Over 12,000 followers now on YouTube. Well done, Adam. Keep it going, son. It was nice to finally meet him pre-season as well. So, yeah, look, he's doing his bit. He's up there this morning, up there earlier than some of the reporters, Liam.
Oh no, it's excellent stuff. Really good effort from the lad. Doing a good job. Keep up the good work. And if you want to make it in this industry, that's what you've got to do. You've got to graft. You've got to get up earlier than everybody else, and you've got to go out there and get the story. So good on you, Adam.
Yeah, well done, mate. Keep up the good work. Keep an eye on his Twitter as well. He will be coming up with, I'm sure, a few exclusives, and it's always with a bit of humour as well. So it's always good to see, as I say, somebody trying to do something a bit different. Okay, we have asked for a lot of questions on Twitter. Stephen Locke was in early last night. We'll come to the chat for the second part of the show. Stephen Locke says he wants to know about the Telegraph's piece. He said, do you think the reported £50 million budget for January is accurate or false?
All the little bits that I've heard, it sounds about right. Yeah, sounds about right. And I think there's a lot of people getting in a bit of a twist about this. Yeah, getting in a bit of a twist about it. And I don't really see it. Like I don't see what the problem is. If the new owners were to spend in the region of that per window, every single window, £100 million spend per season, that will be up there with absolutely everybody in Europe, effectively. If you put that in consistently every single window, it's about building. Newcastle United do not, and this is absolutely certain on this, do not need to go and sign 50, 60 million pound players in January. It is just a recipe for disaster.
They've got to sign the right players.
Well, they've got to go and sign. Look, I would rather they went out and spent on 5, 10 million pound players, getting the value right, looking for players whose contracts are up. Story in Newcastle World this morning. Bit of an exclusive on Nicolas Sula. So check that one out. But those type of players where their contract's up, you can get relative value. You can go out and sign them. They'll come. Obviously, you'll have to pay them decent wages, but I'd rather they went out and did that. Rather they went out and signed 4 players at £12 million each, then spent one on 150. 150 isn't going to keep Newcastle United in the division. 412s might keep them in the division because they need to level up in a number of positions in this team. It isn't just a case of sprinkling a little bit of fairy dust on the team. It's a case of they need to build a proper Premier League capable squad where we know, we've seen it all. You scratch the surface. One injury to Callum Wilson between now and January is potentially fatal to Newcastle United season. One injury to Alan St. Maximin is potentially fatal in Newcastle United season. They need to get themselves in a position where that isn't the case. They need to have more quality throughout the squad. Obviously, key areas being centre halves just isn't right. None of it is right for the Premier League. But I've been banging that drum since January. Your fullbacks aren't up to the level you would expect in many ways, and your centre midfield needs a bit of a revamp. As key parts to the team. But I think you've got to have a little bit of faith. There's a lot of people talking about the transfer links that have come before the manager. I think if anybody believes that a manager purely picks the players and will purely pick the players from now moving forward, there's a naivety to that. I think if anybody thinks that there aren't already plenty of agents offering people at the football club, you'll also be naive. I think you'll also be really naive to think that there aren't football advisors in and around every single part of the consortium at present who are helping them make these football decisions without a chief executive, without a manager up until yesterday, and without a director of football, which is a key appointment for the football club. I think there's a naivety to think some people, I've had responses like that on Twitter, I haven't responded to them, but there is essentially a naivety to think that these conversations with footballers, with agents, representatives, haven't been going on for weeks. And, since the very start of this process, since they've taken over, be naive to think that isn't going on at the moment, because preparations have to be put in place. Players have to be sounded out, and their representatives have to be sounded out to see, is that something you'd be keen to explore? Would you be interested? What kind of money would you be after? Is this a deal that they can do? What value is the player? These conversations have been going on and will continue to go on. And they will not all be driven by Eddie Howe. They'll not all be driven by Amanda Staveley. They'll not all be driven by Frank McParland. They'll all be driven by a number of different people around this football club.
Yeah, okay. He did have a second part of his question. No, which was about Eddie Howe's first decision. I mean, Graham Jones still at the club. We talked about this last week as well. More or less saying that his position at the club has been, granted, secured by the owners. What if Eddie Howe doesn't want him?
It's an interesting one. An interesting one that he's already been secured his place. And that was very clear from the first conversations that he'd had, obviously, with Amanda Staveley and Murad Gadusi. I think he is a coach who can add value to a Newcastle United coaching team. Probably hasn't covered himself in glory in terms of some of the performances and the style of the team. By his own admission, it isn't the style of football that he wants to employ. Did talk about the idea you don't become Barcelona, well, whoever overnight. You're Real Madrid. You can't suddenly flick a switch and go from a team that is consistently underperformed for a length of time to suddenly change things overnight, especially the manner in which Newcastle United were conceding goals does take a bit of time to adjust. And I think this is why the international break is going to be really positive. But it's my understanding that Graham Jones will remain at the football club. In what capacity? I think he will be part of the coaching team. I think there's been suggestions it'll be more of an assistant type role, similar to what he has at present. But I suppose only time will tell on that. Eddie Howe will come in with his own coaches, as has happened today, with his own ideas. And I think it's actually it's a benefit that Jones does fit into that structure and has fitted into that structure under Jason Tindall very, very recently before he came to Newcastle United. And I think he knows the way that Eddie Howe works, as he mentioned in his press conference last week. So I think it's actually, of all the coaches, it's quite a seamless one, seamless move to keep Jones on the scene. And I think, like I say, he definitely gets it. His heart's in the right place. He wants the best for Newcastle United. But I think we saw limitations of his own coaching ability. I think he's a good coach, good training ground coach, good with the players, good around the players. And that was one thing that was really noticeable at Brighton. Like I say, 20 yards away from the dugout itself. The attention that...
Oh, he's frozen. Probably a good time to... Oh, he's back. Are you back?
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I'll go quickly in case I freeze again. The attention that Jones was paid by players. I remember one point in the first, I can't know which half it was, Callum Wilson, and he was giving him direction, and Wilson's eyes were fixed on Jones. They know what he's saying works. They care about what he's saying, and he's got the respect of the playing squad. Whatever anybody might think outside that, it's quite clear from the body language and the actions of the players on Saturday. They believe in him. He's got their respect, and I think that's a positive sign. And I think that's not the type of thing you want to boot out the door quickly. As for the other coaches, I would expect the other two will go, and I think we'll see announcements on that potentially this week.
Yeah. Okay. Stuart Taylor said, "What do you think Eddie Howe has inherited as a squad, Liam?"
I think he's inherited a poorly balanced squad with a lot of limitations, but with a smattering of quality in certain areas. I think he's organized. He's got a squad that can be organised to be much harder to beat and can create more chances. I don't believe that there was a lot of talk under Rafa Benitez, the short blanket idea. Steve Bruce, in a less eloquent way, talked about it weekly. Shutting the door at one end and opening it up the other. Like I don't believe it's as black and white in that as that, and I think that's a cheap excuse. I think you can. There's good enough footballers in that squad that a decent manager will be able to organise that team to not only be toughish to beat, but also create more chances than what they're doing. And I think that's the key to what Eddie Howe needs to do between now and January before you can really start getting improvements in the squad in place.
Yep. Okay. Thanks for your question, Stuart. Ian Hull says, is there any truth in the link to Michael Edwards from Liverpool as director of football or sporting director? I know that him and Eddie Howe go way back.
Well, that's the truth in the links is that he visited him. He visited him not that long back. I don't know the dates and timescales, but as part of Eddie Howe's almost football reconnaissance, where he was going around improving himself, went over to Atletico Madrid, went over to lots of clubs around this country, and just took in lots of different ideas and approaches, learned himself. So he was ready to come back to the Premier League game, a better coach than he left at Bournemouth. And one of those trips was to take in the football side of things at Liverpool with Edwards. I think it seems at the moment, and I haven't had any yes or no on this one, but it seems at the moment that Michael Emenalo seems to be leading the way. And what I would say on that one, and there may be questions on that subject also, but my opinion on that would be that it would be an incredible appointment, and that would be the type of game-changing appointment that really shows that this takeover and the people who've conducted really mean business.
Okay, interesting. Next question from Phil Scott on Twitter. He says, how many of the 11 players who started at Brighton do you think will start against Brentford? He thinks 6.
I don't know. I'd have to go through the team, but I would think probably the majority. And you're saying 6, so that is the majority. And I would tend to agree on that front. I think we've seen Eddie Howe deploy largely a 4 at the back, so there might be some changes in that department. Dubravka's an interesting one because he's an obvious change to make because of his quality, but Caldala will be around the squad throughout the international break, and we've seen a preference from managers of past to stay with players who they've got around because they can work something with them. It may be the case that continues for the short term. I think Jacob Murphy put a decent account of himself. I think I would like to keep him in the side if I could. I think Matt Ritchie is one that's always going to divide opinion, especially between me and you, Steve. I think
keep him in. Give him the captaincy.
If I can have Matt Ritchie, obviously they've got the history of Bournemouth, of course, as well. If I can keep Matt Ritchie in that 20, 30 yard square pocket between the edge of the 18-yard box going out towards the touchline, in and around that area, deeper from there, swinging crosses in all day, I think Newcastle will score more goals than they'll miss because his deliveries, although it lets him down at times from set pieces, is incredible. And he creates chances for the forward line, but put him in the sort of 60 yards behind that, and he's a nightmare. He's a defensive nightmare. And that's one thing, another little area they're going to have to get to grips with. Going through the rest of the team defensively. Look, I don't think Kraft had his worst game, so I think Eddie Howe watching that might not be disappointed with him. I think Clark and Lascelles, can you get away with both of those players playing in the same team? Now, we're talking about a centre-half partnership was probably the best in the Championship 5-6 years ago. Is that really still what we should be putting out in the Premier League now? I think not. Isaac Hayden had a decent game, but is he a Premier League answer in that position? I'm not sure. John Joe Shelby had his opportunity. Forget the free kick thing. What a joke that was. But did he really do enough? Not for me. Miguel Almiron was very disappointing. Very, very disappointing. Really poor. Another key to Eddie Howe's success is going to be unlocking something in Miguel Almiron, getting his confidence back up and getting him in positions where he can produce his best football. But yeah, I think Joe Willock might come into the side. I think anybody watching him will think, look, there's my legs in midfield. Could be for an Almiron. But yeah, I would suspect probably seven would be a guess. 7 or 8. I don't think there'll be wholesale changes, but there'll be tweaks to the system, certain personnel. But the international break with certain players you would change, and the one I'm looking at is Martin Dubravka. That is one that I would instantly change. Might be one that doesn't, simply because he's away. He's probably going to be away from the group for the majority of the next 2 weeks.
Okay, last question from Twitter is from Folky. He says, do you think there'll be a change in captain, Liam? He says, Lascelles seems to have lost his drive and leadership a little. And would Howe consider Wilson as captain? Someone to lead by example from the front. He's already a senior player and clearly has passion for the club.
I'd be surprised, but I'm not. You can't rule it out, but I'd be surprised. I would be surprised because it's a type of decision that it will be a strange one for a manager to come in and start ruffling those kind of feathers, having just walked through the door. It's a type of decision you might make at the end of the season. It's a type of decision if you're in dire straits come January, you might come to an agreement with the captain who steps down and somebody else takes the mantle. But it's quite a divisive move to swap the armbands around. You have leaders on a football pitch and they don't have to wear an armband. There's plenty of leaders in football teams aren't the captain. So I think it's one that people always look at, and I always find it a little bit false. I don't really think it makes much of a difference, because if you've got a leader in terms of the ability that they've got, Callum Wilson's already a leader in this football team. He's already a leader from the front because of his attitude, his effort, his work rate, and his output because of his goals. You've got somebody like Alan St. Maximin in his own way is a leader in this football team because he's able to lift them from nothing, think of Burnley last season, to something. Hasn't done that for a few weeks now, but has that ability. There's leaders all over this team in many different ways. Martin Dubravka's a leader. Jamal Lascelles in his own way is a leader. But yeah, I think Matt Ritchie, as you say, is a leader in certain aspects. I think that the armband, to me, isn't a huge thing. It might be to other people, but I don't think it's the type of thing you start ripping off people and handing to others. It's the type of thing that can upset and be divisive, because certain people will agree with it and certain won't. And what's the point in making that kind of decision unless it's absolutely necessary? And look, we don't have the full information here. Jamal Lascelles might not want to be captain anymore. He might. There might be plenty in the squad think, look, should we hand this over? And it might be the easiest decision Eddie Howe can make is to change a captain. We don't know the full information, but I would suggest, looking at it from what we do know, it's probably the kind of divisive thing that I would imagine a new manager walking through the door would avoid.
Okay, I've got one more question from Twitter. Adam Duda said, how aware do you think the owners are that it is key that the signings are made at the start of the January transfer window and not the end? Well, I would say, I'll answer this, because Frank McPartland's been around the game for years. He'll know this 100%, won't he?
Yeah, of course he does, Steve. You're absolutely right. The need for transfers doesn't just go back to last summer. It goes back to the January before that. So everybody knows who's watching Newcastle United that they need strengthening in certain positions, and it hasn't happened for nearly 12 months now. They had a decent window previous to that this summer with the Wilson's one, then obviously the St. Maximin before that. But the last two have been really underwhelming. And I think everybody knows that they need players in it. Look, how many games is there in January? I don't know. I mean, you could potentially discount the FA Cup if you wanted to, but there's probably 3 games in January, 4 games in January. You can't just write them off. You get another point in the season where they're going to need to be performing big in each one of those games, and improving the squad and getting players in early is going to be key.
Yeah, okay. We're going to give a shout out to our sponsors now. As always, big thank you to Spider VPN, Google Spider VPN. They come up at the top of your search list. They can help protect your computer from nasty viruses and everything else, protecting your passwords, your computers. Google Spider VPN. They are the boys to trust. Skipsandbins.com as well. Thanks to Scott and the lads. Telephone 0800 25 45 25 3. Email inquiries at skipsandbins.com. Website www.skipsandbins.com. Easy contract free. and pay-as-you-go waste collection. And thanks to L&G Family Funeral Directors 01913897245 and at johnnaqtechshop.co.uk, the makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Wallsend, Newcastle. And thanks to Jab Signature as well, jabsignature.co.uk for making our flyers. If you want to subscribe to the channel, hit the Newcastle Legends logo in the bottom right-hand corner and you can subscribe for free. We still do 7 shows a week. Hit the thumb up to like the video, click share to share to your other social media, and drop into the comments box to speak to like-minded Newcastle fans and to pose a question, which we'll try and get through a few in the second half of the show. We're also available as a podcast on iTunes and Spotify, and the rest usually goes up 24 hours after the show. NUFC Matters Christmas Party, tickets are £12. Supermac and Gibbo, the entertainment, along with Junior Turner. November the 19th, Tyneside Irish Centre, and an evening with Peter Beardsley a week later, Friday, November the 26th, 7 o'clock, Tyneside Irish Centre. Tickets for both events are from newcastlelegends.com and click shop. £15 the tickets for Beardsley. And we've also got an evening with Supermac and myself at Bobix in Jesmond. This is for the food bank, bobix.com for your tickets for that event. Don't forget as well, you can make a donation to the food bank at any time. NUFC fans, foodbank.co.uk, and you can make a virtual donation in there. And you can also enter the raffle for the signed Peter Beardsley custom-made trainers from I Am The Renovation. Tickets are £1 each from the same website, NUFC fans, foodbank.co.uk. Don't forget, copies of Every Boy's Dream are in the back page in Newcastle and in Gateshead's Metro Centre, and you can buy them online as well at Amazon. Also, Peter Beardsley will be making an appearance on Sunday the 30th of January at the Tyne Theatre on Westcott Road in Newcastle. A variety of tickets available for that, and you can go on to Groupon or Voucher, make somebody's Christmas, buy them a nice Christmas present, an evening with Peter Beardsley, an afternoon, with Peter Beardsley, Sunday the 30th of January. Don't forget as well, NUFC Matters have got a website, nufcmatters.com. Lots of T-shirts available on there. Okay, we will come to the chat. Gary Hannon's used the super chat to get in for a question above everybody else. What's happening to Lee Charnley if he's been terminated, and who will take over if it's true? Now, Gary's question is referring to something that was doing the rounds on Twitter last night. Newcastle United Enterprises Limited terminated Lee Charnley's contract on the 8th of November. Is that genuine, Liam?
Yeah, so it was announced on the 8th, but it was terminated after the takeover. As I suggested, he was going to be one of the first changes to happen. But as you've seen, you do need certain people to be in and around the football club to carry out the duties that they had previously. So they've needed Lee Charnley to continue to do what he did before. There's been a lot of talk of Lee Charnley leading on the manager search and Lee Charnley this, Lee Charnley that, and that's not my understanding at all. But I do think they've needed somebody who knows the football club, who's been here to continue for that little bit of continuity is what you need. And look, people get themselves all in a twist about these things. Lee Charnley will not be here at this football club for any length of time. It is purely a handover thing, and I imagine he'll be ushered out the back door in the not too distant future when key appointments are made to the football executive, which is still a skeleton compared to what it was previously under the previous owner before Ashley.
Okay, Lee Taylor says, when do you think Eddie Howe will have his first press conference?
Later this week, is what I've been told. So I would expect, I'm just guessing here, but later this week to me feels like Thursday or Friday. Yeah,
okay. Gary said in the super chat question, who do you think will take over his role?
I have no idea. I'm not gonna bullshit out there. I've literally no idea who would.
Okay, Jeff says, from a practical standpoint, how many players do you think we can replace in January?
At least 4, I would say. And I think an injection of 4 bits of quality to the first team would be a really positive step. So can they? The key to that might be, can they shift some players out as well? They don't need to, of course. We're not in the Mike Ashley mold anymore. But there could be a little bit more room for more than 4. If they can shift a few as well, then sort of frees up that 50 million that we've talked about earlier in the show might become 60 if you can shift a couple more on and get another player, and you might be able to do 5. So I think 4 would be a minimum.
I always laugh when figures get mentioned. I mean, I know you're saying that you're fairly set on that figure could be accurate, from what you've heard. But I always find it bizarre if that's the case. Why we would even tell anybody what we're thinking about spending. I think it could also be a little bit of chirurgy in the sense that they know. Anyone knows Newcastle's coming out. Well, they've only got 50 million to spend.
Of course.
We're not going to get that off them. So could be a little bit of cat and mouse. I think you just wait and see what happens. It's a bit like Christmas, January for us as Newcastle fans. Wait and see what happens.
Yeah, and it's an unexpected bonus, isn't it, really? Nobody expected that Newcastle United we'd normally, if Mike Ashley was still in charge now, we'd be looking at a couple of bargain basement loans to try and save ourselves, which is what's happened in previous seasons. But we're not. We've got a management and recruitment team who are going to go out and sign players that are hopefully going to improve the first team, not just for 3 months, but for the medium term as well.
Yeah, okay. Suggestions from Darren that he would offload Fraser, Murphy, Gillespie, Gale, Matty Longstaff maybe, and one other.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think it's a fair assumption. I think you look at the likes of Gale, it's got to be absolutely top of that list because he's the Andy Carroll of last season, isn't he? Neither use nor ornament. Matty Longstaff, very disappointing loan spell up at Aberdeen. I think that was make or break for him potentially. It's not over. He could come back from that, but doesn't look great from up there. He needs to do a lot of learning, a lot of growing up still. But the thing I look at with Matty Longstaff is this was a loan he should have had 2 years ago. His brother did. It's a loan he should have had 2 years ago. And we might have seen something, a player who we knocking on the door by now. But the management of some of these players, as we know, has been terrible. The contractual situation has been allowed to drag on, and I think that's the fears that you would have about the likes of Elliot Anderson and Joe White, because there's 2 talents there who can be nurtured into players who could knock on a first team door, even at an improved Newcastle United in 2-3 years' time, because they're that good and that talented. So, fingers crossed that lessons have been learned and can be improved upon, because Matty Longstaff struggling up in Scotland isn't a surprise, because the lad has gone from the age of about 18 to 20 barely playing any football, which isn't good for anybody. He's had his injuries, of course, but he needed to go out and play men's football, not kick the odd ball for the 23s and basically do the running drills in the first team. You know what I mean? It needed to be more than that at a really crucial stage in his career, but it's not over for him. Hopefully he can come back from that, because I do think there's a player there. It's just going to be, it's a little bit of a tough learning curve from this season.
Yeah, very tough learning curve. And I think with Dwight Gale, I mean, Eddie Howe could come in and think that he's the best thing since sliced bread, and suddenly has a golden end to his career. But I think he needs to start panicking if Eddie Howe comes in and says that it's a centre forward he always wanted to sign, and he's going to be in his plans. Tom Dixon says Fabian Shaw's got to start playing again alongside Fernandez. Would you agree?
I think Fernandez absolutely plays, and I think if you were to rate all of the other centre halves and who's the next best centre half, it's Fabian Schär. I think, look, you've got to just try and play your better players, and I don't see the point in persisting with some of the players in the first team at the moment over ones who are sitting on the bench or not even getting on the bench, who probably deserve a little bit of a shot. Look, I don't think Fernandez has been great for about the last 12 months. I think we're seeing a player who is getting to the end of his career. But do I think he's a better defender naturally still than Jamal Lascelles? I do. And do I think he's better than Emil Kraft? Definitely, and definitely Kieran Clark as well. So it's hard to make a case to say that even a waning Fede Fernandez doesn't deserve to be in this first team.
Yeah, I would agree. Next question's from Darren. It goes back to the match at the weekend. He says, what was Shelby thinking with his poor effort of the free kick against Brighton? I'm still shocked he wouldn't have even thought about testing the keeper.
Yeah, so there was this, and then there was the corner as well, which was basically the last play of the game, with the absolutely frustrated the life out of me. Anybody sitting around us in that press box will know. Miles Starford can vouch for that, sitting next to us, because I was biting his ear off about it at the time. My option was, when I seen Richie and Shelby stand over, that was, what you need to do is just get a shot on target. That would have been actually my option, even though it was 35 yards out, would have been just get a shot on target and follow it in. Get everybody following it in. Or with a corner, just get the ball in the 6-yard box. Make him catch it. He's not a goalkeeper. He might have dropped it. Make him catch it. Put him under pressure. Don't foul him. But they didn't do any of that. They just floated meaningless balls in the box, which were completely wasted. And it was a little bit of a wasted opportunity. Could they not have worked that free kick better by getting themselves an angle, bringing some players out of the box and getting themselves an angle to get a shot a little bit closer, or work the ball wide and get a ball in, cross in from wide, which you've got to be honest, the centre-half's not going to want to come for and catch, is he? So it was one of those that they had to be cuter, they had to be more clever, and there was a distinct lack of that at the time. So what can you do? It's an opportunity missed. It feels like another 2 points to me when begging at Brighton. I thought they were there for the taking on the day. But there was enough in that second half for me to suggest I was more down after Chelsea than I was after Brighton. And I know we got a point, we got nothing off Chelsea. But Chelsea was devoid of absolutely anything. It was one of the worst performances I've seen in the last few years. Whereas I thought there were bits at Brighton. And they're no mugs. They weren't great on the day. Like I said earlier, I was a little bit disappointed by their levels. Not disappointed because I wanted them to be rubbish and want to win. But you know what I mean? Like, I wasn't as impressed as a lot of the reports I've been hearing and you read. But yeah, I think there was something there. And I think there was bits to work with. Whereas after Chelsea, I wasn't in that mindset at all.
I don't think Brighton were out special. And, I said to somebody the other day, if we get this first win against Brentford, suddenly those games that we're looking at over the next few weeks, which look daunting, suddenly look, winnable. That's the difference. That's where that first win becomes also important. And if you can beat Brentford at home and do it convincingly, then the next set of fixtures suddenly don't look as bad, and suddenly you start looking at games like Leicester or Everton and going, could get something out of that. Whereas at the moment, without that first win on the table, you're looking at that going, oh God, we just don't want anything to do with this. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. Is there any truth? Yeah, go on.
This question from Bernard. Bernard, I wrote the story, man.
Well, this is why he's asking you.
Of course, there's truth in it.
Well, there you go. There's your answer, Bernard. I mean, if he wrote it, then that's why it's true. He's doubting your experience as a journalist, doubting your sources.
I don't think he is. No, I think he probably wants a bit more detail. The detail's all there. Look, it's the exact fit of a type of player that Newcastle United are looking for in January. And I'm not going to say it will happen, but there did seem some positivity around it. People I've spoken to, so we'll have to wait and see on that one. But it's true. There's definitely been talks between representatives behind the scenes.
Thoughts on Keegan? Junior Turner says, does Keegan have a role to play at the club?
I'd love to see Keegan come back to his football club. It'd be such a special moment. He doesn't have to have a role in the regime, but I would love to see him come back to this football club and be welcomed back with open arms. And I think he will be when the time's right.
Okay, Cody is a must signing, says Shane.
Depends on the price, Shane. I mean, Wolves aren't gonna let that captain go for pennies, are they? That's the thing. Are you gonna say if he's a must signing and he's worth 40 million, are you gonna blow a big amount of money on him in January and maybe not be able to strengthen in other areas? I would argue no, if the 50 million is to be believed. So I think he's a great leader and would be a fantastic signing for the club. But look, I think they're going to have to be clever in January, and I think they will be. I'm actually quite confident that they'll sign 3 or 4 players who make a real difference to this team.
Okay, Shane just wants to know your thoughts on, whether you think there'll be more done in the loan market in January.
If that's the type of deal that you can do, depends what clubs are offering. You can't offer something that they won't accept. If they're not willing to sell somebody, but he's a player that you want, you might end up doing a loan with an obligation. But I think it's about being dynamic. It's about being pragmatic in transfer windows, and I think they're equipping themselves with a team who are going to be able to do that. And we're in a much more dynamic position than we've been for a long, long time in a transfer window. So I'm really positive about the whole thing.
John says lots of talk of need for defenders. We do need to improve there, but I think a striker is the must, as any sort of injury to Wilson from 1st of February would be a disaster. Yeah, Liam said that about any injury before Christmas as well, which I would say is it's a must, a striker. NE28 says, I'm not sure we can expect any club to buy our dross. Maybe a few could go out on loan. David says, Charnley, Rubin and Staveley are active directors of Comp, Newcastle United Ventures Limited. Yeah, I mean, like Liam said, I can't expect, we will have Charnley for much longer. Toon just says 50 million won't be enough to keep us up, Liam.
It's ridiculous saying things like that. I just don't get it. I don't get I'm sorry, Toon. I just don't get this weird money criticism that seems to be coming their way. We didn't spend a penny under Mike Ashley. These lot are going to put 50 million in every single window. God, it's like it's night and day. People need to get a grasp on what's happening here.
Spent a few quid buying the club. Also spent a few quid on running costs. I think that was a story that was running the Chronicle this week, if I'm wrong, about
the Athletic, yeah.
Oh, the Athletic, £30-odd million chucked in for running costs of the club. And we know there needs to be major restructuring at the training ground for starters. And we've already seen them tidying the ground up. So none of this is cheap. And I think what we've got to remember is none of this is an instant fix.
No.
It's going to be a transition, and it's going to be a positive transition, but it's going to be a transition which is going to take a hell of a lot of time, Liam.
So here's an example, right? We're all talking fantasy numbers, so everyone's talking about this 50 million. 50 million won't be enough to keep Newcastle United, right? So you can go to Man United, you can sign Lingard for 15, you can sign Tarkowski for 10, you can go and sign a couple others for in and around that level. Players going out of contract, you bring a Sula in, pay around the same again, 10 to 15, and then sign another maybe one or two players. Will that keep Newcastle United in the division? It's a damn sight more chance of keeping Newcastle in the division than what Mike Ashley would have spent. And I think, like I say, with some dynamic activity, like I say, and just being able to react and move with the market, which January you need a lot of because things move and change daily in that very short window of transfer activity, then I think Newcastle United will be in a really strong place. I don't see the negativity about numbers. I just don't see it.
Yeah, it is going to be an interesting transfer window, but as I say, it's a long-term plan. This it really, really is. Willie, good morning. He says, "Morning, Steve. Just subscribe to the show. Welcome, mate. The new manager in place and with the internationals now, this gives Eddie time to get the players to gel together." Willie, 100%, mate. That's what it's all about now. And yes, players are away, etc. But he gets a chance to get his feet under the table, set his plans. It's a good time for a new manager to come in, Liam, isn't it?
Great time. You couldn't ask for a better time, really. Of course, I would have wanted him in 2 weeks ago. And we probably would be slightly a little bit further on, but it is what it is in the way it is. And he's going to take advantage of this 2 weeks to just improve certain things about the team. And hopefully we'll see a result of that against Brentford next up.
Yeah. Skinner says Lingard, Cody, Trippier, and a big bid for Jude Bellingham, please. That's what he's after. Gary says, I heard Mark Overmars is not coming since Ajax want to keep him. So is there any ideas who would like to take the role as a sports director? I mean, there's no guarantee we will have one, but, it would be nice, I guess, to have one. But it's going to have to be somebody who gets on with Howe as well.
Yeah, I'll be honest, though. I think they've bought themselves a little bit of time on that front because I think they can probably shape the director of football, sporting director, whoever it may turn out to be, appointment more in their image and the way they would like it to go rather than of the manager. Sometimes I think maybe with the Emery appointment might have required a lot more sort of synergy between manager and director of football. Whereas I think with Howe, they'll be able to appoint somebody that they want, and I think that's an important thing as well. I think it's important to have that the checks and balances. That I think they should be the ones driving this appointment, not a manager.
Yeah, I mean, and again, coming back to Frank McParland, he's got a wealth of experience in the game, and somebody like him can make a perfect stopgap if they do want to bring somebody like that in at a later date. But yeah, I mean, lots of names getting bandied around, and that's the problem. It's it is like open season.
It's the Wild West. It's the Wild West, Steve. Everybody's chasing their gold, and the amount of players being thrown at Newcastle United since the takeover, it's the Wild West for agents.
Yeah. James says, will the Premier League go through with their threat and not deal with us? I can't see that at all. We've covered this as well. And agents have the say in football.
Yeah, of course they do. And it's all about making money, remember. It's all about making money.
50 million should be okay if you look at 3 loan deals and 2 transfers, says Darren. Again, just depends who they're chasing. Francis says,
fine,
in serious need of a creative centre midfielder, if you could sign any creative centre midfielder, who would it be and why?
I think it's an impossible question to answer, Francis. I couldn't say off the top of my head. I like James Ward-Prowse as a midfielder, but he's not really. I wouldn't class him as what you're saying as a creative midfielder. So I don't know. Yeah, somebody like James Ward-Prowse off the top of my head would be a midfielder I'll be targeting. Not in January, possibly the summer, but beyond definitely.
John says Joe Linton was 40 million, remember. Everton got Great and Townsend for 2 million. Yeah, it's all about the numbers. Tarkowski in January must be a priority, says Slimy, Green and Grimy. Tom Dixon, I like that name. Tom Dixon says, Liam, what's your thoughts on managers getting sacked? The likes of Aston Villa and Norwich are looking for new managers. Well, I've got to laugh. I am going to bring this up with Gibbo on Thursday night, but it's Aston Villa's press and Norwich's press are now just going through all the stories that our press wrote about 3 weeks ago, and they're going through the same list.
Yeah, Roberto Martinez and Fonseca. Yeah.
Steve Bruce is a new one for Norwich. I bet they're delighted.
He hasn't been linked with that, has he?
Yeah, he was linked. Yeah, former captain. Remember,
he was, but I think
Manuel beat the Mackhams.
It doesn't. I'll be honest. That doesn't sound like a Norwich appointment. The type of approach that they've got with their managerial stuff and the way they try to run the football club. I think Bruce would be a major culture change at that football club.
He'd probably think Delia was his own private chef.
Let's not go down that route. No. We'll be getting all the pictures sent in if I'm looking outside the Greg's and the kebab shop and all that kind of thing. I'm not sure his tastes are quite up to that level at times anyway, but he's a man of the people, is Steve Bruce. No, what I would say it's interesting. I think Newcastle United fans were slaughtered about the Steve Bruce stuff, and it's something that people have covered. Aston Villa haven't been slaughtered anywhere near enough for getting rid of a bloke who, yes, he's had a tough 12 months. It hasn't been great at Villa for 12 months. But God, the bloke got them promoted back to the Premier League. He created a team and a club with hope that they could become almost an Aston Villa of what they were 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Got them a really good grounding, a solid position, and basically suffered from building a team around the best player that Aston Villa have produced in decades, in Jack Grealish. Struggled because he built a team around him and hasn't been able to replace the irreplaceable. Look, it's a tough gig for anybody, and I think Aston Villa probably deserve a lot more criticism than Newcastle did, because Dean Smith had bought a lot of time at that football club from the promotion and things like that. But look, each to their own. Everybody knows their own club better than we do. But I would just look from the outside in and say that the Aston Villa thing is a lot more deserving of criticism than anything that's happened at, for example, Norwich or Newcastle United.
Kirk says, I'd say Fonseca's too big a name for clubs like Villa and Norwich. They're not big enough clubs. He'd be wanting a big job. Andy says Delia would show him how to make a proper bacon sandwich, referring to Steve Bruce. Mark says Norwich have come out with 3 shortlisted: Lampard, Hasselhunt and Dean Smith. Yeah, Dean Smith.
Hasselhunt one's interesting because do I see him leaving a club like Southampton and go to Norwich. And the big problem that Hasenhüttl's got at Southampton is the lack of support that he gets from above. I don't think he's going to then want to jump into a Norwich where they don't spend money. I think Hasenhüttl will want to move somewhere where he gets a lot more support because he is a very good coach. He is a very good manager. He's just kind of stuck in a bit of a rut at Southampton. And I think there's a reason why they keep him there, because they know he's a good coach and they will not get relegated under Ralph Hasenhüttl. Look, I'd love to be wrong because I'd like them to be one of the three that would probably mean that Newcastle United wouldn't be in that three. But I think Hasenhüttl is an interesting one. Lampard would probably fit the bill. But I would have doubts about whether Lampard's good enough. I'm never sure, because I look at what he did previous to Chelsea and he may have learned lessons at Derby, but the Derby job wasn't a good one. He was at a time when Derby spent a lot of money and couldn't get them promoted. So I think yeah. And what was the third one?
Dean Smith.
Dean Smith. Is he going to want to jump straight into a job? Who knows? But obviously he's got a decent pedigree because he's done not only a good job at Aston Villa, but he's done good jobs elsewhere as well. So yeah, interesting times ahead. Tottenham, of course, sparked this, didn't they? With the booting of Nuno, and then I think everybody else has jumped on the bandwagon.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Things are starting to take shape one step at a time, says Keith. Stu says, Liam's right. Don't worry about the money side of things and don't believe everything you read in the media. Look at all the rubbish printed in our recent manager search. So, again, a few people are starting to get a little bit wised up to some of the media. You can't put them all in the same barrel. GG says, looking forward to seeing an intense Eddie Howe evaluating the lack of intensity in Joe Linton and Shelby. Do not appear to be his type of players. Do you think these kind of players will be shipped out, Liam?
I think Joe Linton's a bit harsh. I don't think it's a lack of intensity on his behalf. Shelby, I think absolutely. And it will be interesting to see the way these players adapt. Hard work is not something that tends to have gone hand in hand with John Joe Shelby when assessing, when fans have assessed his performances. So it will be interesting to see how he adapts into this new system.
Stu hopes that the scouting setup changes and whoever recommended Joe Linton was axed immediately. NE28 says other clubs are going to try and dump bad contracts on us. Ramsey and Coutinho spring to mind. We need to avoid these deadweight deals.
What I would say, right, and this is another thing, I'm all for this Joe Linton, but it's like, and I'm all for this criticism of Steve Nixon for the Joe Linton deal. But if you're going to criticise a bloke for a Joe Linton deal, what about Alan St-Maximin? Who he has an argument, and this is me playing devil's advocate. He has an argument. So they paid a combined 56 million for Joe Linton and Alan St-Maximin. I would argue if Alan St-Maximin were put on the market in January, he would pay that back. So is that not saying somebody's done a good job in terms of scouting?
Okay, yeah, it's another way of looking at it. Morning to Gareth from Spider VPN. Thanks for your sponsorship, mate. We'll give you a shout out earlier on. They're the boys to trust for your internet security. Buzzing with How coming in. He was that early. Apparently, the bacon still hadn't been cooked, he says. Thanks for that. John from QTech, thanks for your sponsorship as well. He says, no bacon for Eddie. Gareth, definitely a poached egg. And I just want to finish with this really as well. I got sent this, did send it to Liam. I'm not sure who created it. He says, when the new owners inform me that the city has a Greg's open till 3 a.m. and a pint is less than £2 in the Beehive, it was an easy decision. Eddie Howe. Classic.
It is.
NewcastleWorld.com is where you can find Liam. Just give a little shout out to that before we finish, mate.
Yeah, like I said, as Steve said there, just have a look at the link down here. Give it a click. Give me a follow at Liam J. Kennedy 23 on Twitter if you like what I do. A couple of good stories gone up there this morning. So check them out, yeah.
Great stuff, Liam. As always, good to speak to you. Look forward to seeing you next Tuesday, mate. Bright and early, 10:30. Take care, mate.
Cheers.